Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's Writers Chat. This is the place where writers like to gather together. We talk about all things writers, about writing and for writers. And so we're really glad you're with us today, either live, we got a lot of our regular cohorts in the chat room, or whether you're going to watch the replay. So welcome with us today. I am joined today by a lot of the crew that are behind the scenes at Writers Chat. And so we're glad to have you here. We got Melissa and Bethany and Jan and Elaine, and I've asked them to stay on the video because we got a really neat thing to talk about today. And we're going to look at writers' routines, kind of their habits, and how we can develop better habits and get rid of those horrible habits that hold us back. And a lot of it's based on this book, which I'll introduce in just a little bit more, Atomic Habits by James Clear. Okay, and so before we dive into the material, because I'm going to do some screen sharing here in a little bit, before we dive into the material, I thought we'd start with a very kind of soul-searching, thought-productive question for my victims. Oh, not my victims. Friends here, the four here. And the question is, and it's kind of based on a Maya Angelou quote that I think is just so powerful. And her quote is that there's no greater agony than bearing an untold story within us. Ooh. So my question for the four of you here and for all of you in the chat is, do you still have your best work inside you, or an untold story inside you that for whatever reason hasn't been birthed yet? What do you guys think about that question?
Who's gonna go first?
I think it's still in there somewhere. I don't think that my best work has come out yet, but every day try to improve. So
that's good.
I would agree. I have so many things zooming around in my head, things that I want to put into print, and I look at years ahead. I'm older than some of you here and probably younger than some of you, but as I look at years ahead, I think I have more ideas floating around in my head than I have years to accomplish them.
That's a good insight. Bethany, Jan, what do you guys think?
I'm sure I haven't done my best work yet. I'm just waiting for God to put things in order.
Bethany, what do you think?
This is such a hard question.
It is hard.
I was really wrestling with how to answer it because with the two books that we just wrote, I'm so proud of them. And the Platinum Faith book, when we were writing it, we just joked, God always gets the glory for our writing. That's just something intuitive, right? That's our purpose. But Michelle and I both just said several times throughout the entire writing process that it was so hard to write that God could only get the glory for what happened out of it, because none of it was us. It was just birthing every chapter. So at this stage, on this day, I would say that is probably some of my best writing in those two books right now, just because I finished them. But I also don't want to say my best writing isn't still ahead of me, because I hope that I will become a much better writer as I go forward. So I don't know, I'm straddling the fence on your question.
It's a tough
question. It's a question to think about.
Hard question.
It is.
It is a hard question, and I think it's a question that should maybe help inspire us to always try to do our best for God.
Yeah.
On that. I think that's the essence of it. Elaine, just as a response to you, I read last year, I think it was, a 80-year-old man who made a list of at least 20 more books he wanted to write.
Wow.
So it's never ending. God is never
Right.
ending. So we can be part of it. Yeah. So this all kind of generated by an article that I read called the Daily Writing Routines of 12 Famous Writers, and how it related to this book. And I shared it on our page, and I'll pull it up here in a second so you can see the link too, but I shared it on our writer's page a couple of months ago, and we really had a lot of response from them. Both the article and the book are secular. I'm going to just put that qualifier out. And it's not a God-oriented book, but I think we could bring what we need to and put it in God's hands, what we need to on that way. So I'm going to screen share. I'm going to do a quick little PowerPoint here, see if I can find it here. And, how about that? I mean, I got to do, right? I got to do start show, right? Wait a minute. Where do I hit to start show?
Play from start.
Say what?
Play from start, all the way to the left.
The icon.
Perfect. Got it. Yay! How about that, guys? Okay. Well, this is, like I said, this is the name of the article if you want to Google it, but here is the link for it also on that. They are both by this author named James Clear, who I want to introduce you to today, because he's the one who wrote Atomic Habits on that way. And there's a picture of him. I always like to see him. And I learned this morning he's an Ohio one. For those of us with Ohio roots who live in Ohio, he lives in Columbus that way. So I was kind of excited about that. I did not know he was a Buckeye. And his real focus is self-improvement based on scientific research. He just has a real keen passion and an interest in that. And I thought this was interesting too. So I stuck it in the notes there that 5% of his profits, he has a passion to fight malaria across the world. So, and this book has been, his book Atomic Habits has been bestseller. So he has raised a lot of money for that. And isn't that a neat thing for us to think about as we do writing? I know some of us have that every once in a while. We support a project that way, but I just thought that was really kind of a cool extra mission, and made me more excited about the material he's got. So this is where I got these questions originally about how many people die with their best work still inside them, and how can you pull that potential out of yourself and share it with the world. And that's sort of his essence in his book, Atomic Habits, on that. And I put this quote down at the bottom, is when you look at the top performers in any field, you see something that's goes much deeper than intelligence or skill. They have to possess the willingness to do the work that gets it done. They are masters of their daily routines. Doesn't that strike you guys? Think about that. If you could have, let's say Bethany has the best talent in the world, but if she doesn't apply it, it won't get done. It's that day to day. Johnny's not here today, but when Johnny and I first met, one of the things our little group said, we had a little saying that we said is that to be a writer, you have to put your butt in the chair and your heart in prayer. And I always liked that, butt in chair and heart in prayer to get things done. So I think that those are really two, kind of variations of the question I kind of challenged everybody with a little bit ago, but it's just something to think about. It's this masters of daily routine. Now, in the article, he features 12 writers, and we don't have time to go through all the 12 writers, so go back and read the article if you want to. But I just thought I just pulled, I think, 3 of them out here for us to look at. And this is the E.B. White, who's one of our favorites, my favorites for a number of reasons, said, the writer who waits for the ideal conditions on which to work will die without putting a word on paper. Isn't that true?
True. Very true.
Yeah. You can't wait for, I'll sit there, guys. This is one area I struggle with. I'll sit there and say, well, if I had a half day, I'd start working on that book proposal. That half day never surfaces. I don't know about the rest of you. Anybody want to comment on this quote?
I will quote.
Yeah.
I won't quote, but I will comment. Writing this last book, Michelle's grandson was going through that brain tumor, and then we moved right in the middle of it. Justin left on a deployment right in the middle of the month, right with 24-hour notice.
Yeah.
And then we had like 6 other things that like popped in, right? Like as it was coming. And it almost seems like when you're writing, taking a Christian spin on it, when you're writing something that's going to impact people, or you're praying that's going to impact people, sometimes it seems like the worst conditions get.
Yes.
And so you have to be even more committed to sit down and actually just write.
Absolutely.
And how can we do that commitment? It's usually establishing some good habits and making it a priority, and a lot of prayer. A lot of prayer on that.
Yeah, I frequently tell the devil to go back where he belongs. If he doesn't win, I am writing this. So.
There you go. And you know, the devil likes to use a lot of tools like discouragement and
Right.
procrastination to keep us off from doing it. And I think that's what it's an awareness. And we'll talk about being aware of things here in just a little bit when we get into the book a little bit more. I thought some of the stuff E.B. White said was interesting here, and I'll just read this quote. It says, sorry. There I go. I never listen to music when I'm working. I haven't had that kind of attentiveness, or I wouldn't like it at all. And I'm not one that likes to listen to music either. On the other hand, I am able to work fairly well among ordinary distractions, but I think he's trained himself for this. It takes a while to learn to do this focus. My house has a living room that is the core of everything that goes on. It's the passageway to the cellar, to the kitchen, to the closet where the phone lives. Imagine they didn't have cell phones then. There's a lot of traffic. It is a bright, cheerful room. I think sort of like the room that Bethany introduced us to where she does homeschooling there too. And often I use it as a room to write in despite the carnival that's going around me. In consequence, the members of my household never pay the slightest attention to me being a writing man. They make all the noise and the fuss they want to. And if I get sick of it, I have places I can go. The writer who waits for the ideal conditions on which to write will die without putting a word on paper. I think there's a lot of wisdom to that. So we can develop that attentiveness, but really a habit that we have to build. And we'll teach you a couple things that James Clear says on how to do that in a minute on that. Ernest Hemingway's habit is to write every morning. Some of us are morning people. I think, Bethany, aren't you more of a night person?
You know what I've realized is like, I do my best work in the morning, even though I hate being up.
Okay.
So that's fun.
But you've had to learn that, haven't you?
Yes, I'm still teaching myself to do that, because I write better in the morning, even though I like being up late.
Yeah. Well, I'm not going to read this whole quote, but Ernest Hemingway says that I write every morning as soon as the first light is possible, because nobody will disturb you. But I find I focus more, and my best work is in the morning. So that is a habit, Ernest Hemingway, a routine and a habit that he established in order to get his very long novels written on that. And Barbara Kingsolver wrote, I have to write hundreds of pages before I get to page 1. Isn't that on that often that messy worst draft is not even where we're supposed to be, where we started. And she says it's part of the process. I have a lot of materials I know I will throw away. I thought the rest of her quote, and I'm going to spend a minute here and read this because I know many of us are busy, and quite a few of us still have some kids here at home, or what happens at my house is grandkids invade my house and throw my schedule off, is that she says, my whole career as a novelist, I've also been a mother. I was offered my first book contract the day I came home with the hospital with my first child. Isn't that wild? So I became a novelist and a mother on the same day. These two important lives have always been one for me. I've always had to do them both at the same time. Writing has always been precious, something I wait for, I'm eager for, and I make the best use of. That's probably why I get up so early and have writing time in the quiet dawn hours before nobody leaves me. And I love this next sentence, that the school bus is her muse. When it was out of the driveway and left without anybody to take care of, that was the moment my writing day began, and it ended when the school bus came back. I thought that I just thought that was kind of cool. And her last quote there, that being a mother has made me a better writer. It is also said to be true that being a writer has made me a better mother. Isn't that a neat quote on that? I don't know if any of you guys that are moms want to weigh in on that. Have they impacted each other on that?
Oh, definitely.
How and what way, Melissa?
Well, I homeschooled through most of my early years writing. And so it was always, I couldn't sacrifice that family time and that teaching time for writing. And so it was a matter of learning how to find the balance and fitting it in the times when you could grab a snatch of just a moment, oftentimes at bed when the kids were in bed and I burned the late night oil writing. And so that really impacted me and helped me to see the importance of spending that time with family, but also the importance of if this writing is what God wants me to do, then I need to make the time for it as well, even if it seems like there's no time at all. What's important, you'll set the time aside for. And so it kind of gave me a perspective on that balance.
That did. Jan, Elaine, do you have anything to add to that?
I haven't had kids, excuse me, I haven't had kids at home for quite some time. And so I didn't have that distraction, but I still do have distractions. And yeah, you do have to work around the noise that's around you.
That's exactly. That's exactly. James Clear in his book, and I didn't put this in the PowerPoint, has a whole chapter on creating an environment. Creating the environments that are conducive towards whatever habit you're working for. And a lot of his examples, it's any kind of habit in life, but a lot of his examples could be applied so easily to writing. So easy on that. Well, were you going to say something, Bethany? Did you want to say something?
I second it in the chat, but my husband is in IT. And so we have TVs and computers and technology everywhere in our house. But being a writer has taught, I get to have this other balance with my boys who really love that technology stuff kind of naturally, all three of them, just teaching them the love of words and books and things. And so that's good to let them see.
That's how they crossed over for you, isn't it? Yeah.
Well, yeah, we only had one at home when I started writing. And so it hasn't been the kids so much that have taken my time. It's now that we're retired, it's my husband that takes my time. But I just learned something exciting, that my oldest granddaughter started writing a story. And she's actually on her second one. She said, well, I have to finish both before I can let you read them. So I thought that was exciting, because my writing is having her start at 9 years old. So
wow, that is exciting. We model when we don't know we're even modeling, don't we?
Right.
We do.
My granddaughter inspired.
What? I'm sorry, Elaine. Go ahead.
Sorry. My granddaughter inspired my first children's book, which is finished and waiting for publishing. And she doesn't know she inspired it, but she did. But she also has a love of writing. And she was thrilled when I told her that the story I had told her was now a book. And so she sat down and read it when it was just in manuscript form. But she has since also written her own books, and she really does have a knack. And she's second grader this year. So it's fun to watch. It's fun to watch writing through the generations.
It is, and I think the key lesson is sometimes we get frustrated when we get pulled in different directions, whether we have these different hats that we wear or the roles that we play. But they can also feed into each other and with wonderful gifts. That's what God does. God's in everything, and he pulls us together, and he's called us to be mothers and teachers and grandmoms and sometimes just good neighbors. He's called us to be that way, and we can help. They will merge together, but we also have to have the focus. So I encourage you guys to go read this article. It's really good if you didn't read it before. He does do this summary at the end that I just highlighted here about sometimes you have to push yourself physically with doing like push-ups or treadmills but decide what works for you and get out and move. I'll tell you, I do some of my best writing when I'm doing my steps on my Fitbit. I process something, I organize something, I come up with examples, memories come up, and I think, oh, that's how I need to start that chapter. So physically moving is one thing that came out of this article. Do the most important thing first. That's starting in the morning. We talked about that. Don't let the urgent always take over what's important, what really where God's called you. You got to do that most important things first. This is where I struggle. I will tell you guys that. I struggle with that a lot. And then embrace the struggle and do the hard work, which is kind of like what Melissa was saying. You know, you got to sit there and do that. The first drafts aren't always the best. They can be difficult. Fill out those first 100 pages. It's going to take some work as writers. And I love the quote down here about here. What looks like failure at the beginning is often the foundation for success. You have to grind out the hard work so you can enjoy your best work. So that's kind of the summary of that article on that way. But in the essence that led to his book, Atomic Habits. So how could we establish good writing habits and get rid of those bad ones that like procrastination is one of my one on that way. So here's a picture of the book. The author's name again is James Clear. We met him at the beginning, and I like the essence of it. You can make tiny changes and have remarkable results, and I'll highlight that a little bit here coming up here in a minute. And this is sort of the theme that he gives you a framework and very practical advice for getting 1% better each day. And we'll talk about this 1% rule here in a minute, but I think that's what fascinated me about this book was it was like I kept saying, yes, that's true. Can you see how I marked it? And there I got pages turned down, marked like crazy, because it just rang true, and it's very practical advice, and I'll share a little bit of that here in a couple minutes. And I liked also the second bullet here that he said, we're not the problem. It's not like, oh, I'm never going to do this. I always fail. I just can't get things done. We're not the problem. It's just we haven't found the right system to help us correct the things we want to change and establish what we want to be. And this 1% rule, and it'll come up here in a minute too, is not a reference that, it is a reference that sometimes small difference can accumulate to big things. So every little steps that we take each day will add up. The 15 minutes of writing here and maybe the 1 hour or the 200 words that we edit there will all add up together. But I've often seen that you don't need to be twice as good to get twice the results. Sometimes you just need to be a little bit better. So if you're just 1%, your book proposal might be, and you're writing in your book proposals just even 1% better, you might be the book that agent or that publisher chooses. And I think we can think about that with our service to God. Sometimes if we don't need to be on absolutely every committee at church or answer every call for help, but what if we would stretch ourselves a little bit and just do a little bit more for God? That 1%, if we all did that, wouldn't the world be a wonderful place? It's something to think about, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, on that. So anyway, here's some definitions basically that he starts with. So I thought I'd just run that through pretty quick here. Is that a habit is a routine or a practice performed regularly. It's an automatic result to a specific situation. And you'll see some of his tricks here in a little bit. It's kind of like the habit I've gotten in walking every morning. I get up every morning and I automatically walk anywhere from 5,000 to 8,000 steps before I do anything else, before I take my shower. And it's an automatic response. And walking has now become a habit for me. And he takes the word atomic too. And atomic can be two different things when you think about it. And it does have both meanings, which I think as a writer is a neat way to look how he plays this word all the way through this book. That you get, if you find the right word, and he did find the right word in atomic. When you think about atomic, you think of a thing of immense power stuck into some small thing, an immense energy. But it also can be, you look at the word atom, it can be reduced down to a very small unit. and you stack all these atomic habits over time, you will make a big impact. So it's kind of a neat play on words, I think. He says small steps do make a difference. It's like compound interest. And that's what I think it's challenging for us, because that's difficult to see. We think, I'm never gonna get there. I've got 60,000 words to write or 100,000 words to write. I'm only got 2,000 done. You know, you guys have a lot of you have been there, you know, on that. It's the same with habits. It takes a while. And I'll give you a couple of examples here in a minute, but look at this. Oh, I see a typo, my image thing here. And you may have heard this before. When an airplane takes off, it only has to be off course just by a few feet or less. That ends up 100 miles from its destination at the end. It constantly corrects in little increments to get to where it's going. And I always found that illustration very encouraging. I don't know about the rest of you. I found that encouraging, that we're constantly correcting it, that constantly getting off track of it. Elaine mentioned about distractions. Those distractions are going to happen. We just get ourselves back on and concentrate on that. Have you guys heard that before about the airplane?
I have not, but that's very good. I like that.
Isn't that a wonderful illustration to see?
Like the GPS says, recalculating.
Right.
You hear it over and over again. So that may be what we need when we're working on a habit that we want to get. I've gotten in the bad habit of hitting my snooze alarm in the morning, and you know, and some people, but I still get up early is how I rationalize it, but I like to get out of that habit. It is going to take, I don't need to give up right away. It's going to take a while to get out of that habit, hit that snooze alarm. But that's an example on that. So it's fascinating on that. So he talks about 1 degree. 1% will make the difference on this. And I liked this quote: complaining about not achieving success despite working hard is like complaining that an ice cube is not melting. Sorry for the typos there. I did this early this morning. Is not melting when you heat it up from 25 to 31 degrees. Your work's not wasted. It's just being stored because all the action occurs at 32 degrees. Isn't that a neat?
That's good.
Isn't that a wonderful image? Comments on that quote at all from you guys? You like it? It's just a wonderful image, isn't it? I love the idea that it's being stored. We haven't failed. I think we should get that word out of our vocabulary altogether. We're not a failure. We haven't failed since it hasn't happened yet. We're storing it.
We still need to keep moving forward.
That's right. That's right. And isn't that a wonderful final thing, that mastery requires patience? And I love this. Here's the quote. Here's a wonderful thing. Habits plus deliberate practice will equal mastery eventually. And that way, the person with all the talent isn't always necessarily the one that wins the competition, for example. It's the one that deliberately practices it over and over again. And that's basically what the book is about. He gives us ideas. He introduces what's called the habit loop, and I wanted to give a little bit of background on that these are the 4 steps. You have cues to cravings to response to rewards. And you'll see how that applies here in a minute, but a cue triggers the craving, which motivates the response and provides the reward, which satisfies the craving and then ultimately becomes associated with the cue. So it keeps going around and around and around, and what happens? And cues are like time, location, events, emotional state. Every time I think I'm hungry, I have a craving for potato chips, and my response is to eat the whole bag. And my reward is, I feel too big, and this is not really my reward I want. So how can I change that? So every time the cue hits that I think I'm hungry, I decide I may be craving water. So I drink water. That's my response. And my reward is I didn't get 4,000 calories. That's a kind of an example, loose example of that. But you can see how it could work with writing too. So you think of cues as time, location, events. Cravings is what you are desiring. For example, you want to write more during the day. Your response is actually doing it, writing more, and the reward is that your brain responds that it's satisfied on that way. I love this quote too, that the brain is a reward detector. It responds to, likes that dopamine. It likes to get that accomplishment and that response on that way. So here is these laws, and these are kind of his chapter outlines to let you know what he talks about. 4 basic laws that they have is that good habits, you want them to be obvious, attractive, easy, and satisfying. And do you see how that the habit cues there? Obvious is the cue, attractive is the craving, it's a desire, something that you want, that you really want. Easy, and he has several chapters on how you can make it a little bit easier, and also then it's satisfying. And this is something that will teach you, motivate you for more. And if you want to get rid of a bad habit, you make it invisible. It's the opposite. Unattractive, harder, and unsatisfying. And if you really want to see, he has this really neat graph on this. I put you go to atomichabits.com/cheat sheet, and you can actually see it there, how you can download his whole explanation. You'll get a lot of the background on the book. If you go to his atomichabits.com website too, by the way, he has got a slew of articles that he provides. You could sign up and get his, I don't know if it's daily or weekly newsletter. It is full of wonderful material. It is I looked again on this morning on his articles there. I bet he's got 50 to 100 articles on a lot of this. You could really take this in small bites and get some great ideas from it. But can you see how the habit loop falls into working on something less appealing?
Yeah.
Yeah. If you wanted to take a bad habit of, I have a bad habit is I like wheat thin crackers. If they're in the house, I will eat the whole box. So I don't buy them anymore. I've basically made them invisible. They're not here on that. So I reduce that cue on that. So if you have a habit of always getting on Facebook instead of typing in the morning, then you block yourself from Facebook for the first hour of each day. There's different things you could set up on that. Do any of you gals want to hop in and say, yeah, can you see how that would work either for a good habit or a less appealing habit? An example?
Hide the crackers in the closet. Well, one thing I do with something that I like, food that I really like, is I just take a small portion and then put the box away so that I don't sit there and eat the whole box, because I could eat the whole box of wheat thins too. With writing, it would be push aside something, a hunger, or I want to do this, and say, I can do that later if I do this writing now. That would help me stay on track a little bit better. My reward is Rhonda to go get the chocolate when I get so many words ready.
Chocolate's a great reward.
Oh yeah.
On that. But I think it's an interesting way to frame and see our habits. And I find it almost empowering. It gives us action to do when sometimes we get so overwhelmed or frustrated that we're maybe not getting something done. That happens. So I encourage you to go to his website on that way.
His website is amazing.
What? Say again, Stephanie?
His website is wonderful.
His website is phenomenal.
I'm on it right now. I love it.
Yes. And like I said, just those list of articles alone. I want to give you some examples of making it obvious or making it invisible. You know, we've kind of talked about a little bit more about that. And he has an example of what's called, first of all, to make it obvious, you got to be aware of it. You know, sometimes we mindless eating or we mindless, we've all opened Facebook and next thing we know, it's an hour later. You know, so we got to raise our awareness. And he gives this example called point and click. This has been one of the key things I've been working on. I love this example. And it came from, I believe it was Japan, that they found out, and he has a video that's associated with this too. If you go to his website, there's a video on point and click, that in Japan, people that do the mass transportation, and whether they're driving the big bullet trains or whether the people that it's coming into the station or just before it leaves the station, they have to go through a series of steps so they're aware of all the safety issues. For example, so they point, the door is closed, point, yes, the track is clear, point, and they point and say it out loud. So, yes, I'm going to sit down and write for an hour this morning. Yes, Facebook is turned off, so I'm not going to get a voice. Yes, my phone is on Do Not Disturb. Yes, my manuscript is up. I'm ready to start. Fascinating to watch. So I've gotten, we're going to go back to the food example. I've gotten to the place when I wander out to the kitchen and I'm kind of hungry and I'm not sure if I'm hungry or not. I'm trying to get into the habit of pointing, yes, I am hungry. Yes, those are the wheat thins. No, I said it out loud. I don't want those now. And you see, you name it, you point, you have that habit of pointing. It's amazing. It got my awareness of it. You know, so I just look at that. And he also encourages us to score our habits and be aware of what does interfere. And he has at Atomic Habits, a scorecard that you could download so you can see that. So he says, set an intention to make something obvious. When situation X arises, I will do this. I will do this behavior at this time, at this location. After I pour my cup of coffee, I will write 500 words on my novel. And I love this quote. Most people think they lack motivation when what they really lack is clarity. Isn't that cool? It's lack clarity. That's what this stuff kind of empowered me a little bit about what to do on that and how to make it obvious. And of course, the opposite, we talked about that a few minutes ago, make a bad habit more invisible on that. So do you guys think you could do like this fill in the blank at what time, and at what location? Would that help you guys at all?
It reminds me a little bit of Davis Bunn when he talks about his writing space. Like he has the second desk, which is where he writes, and he only writes at that desk. So that's kind of what he's done in his mind. Like I will write at this time when I sit here, and that becomes like his space.
Yeah, that's a great example. Thank you. Just so we can finish this, so we can have some discussion here that to make it more attractive. You should make your good habits more attractive, make it irresistible. This is what our brains love, dopamine. They like to feel good. And I thought this is interesting that he was saying research is showing it's often the anticipation, not the fulfillment of what's attracting us that gets us to take action. So to have the anticipation of that chocolate jam once at the end of an hour of writing, you know, get you to take action more than actually eating the chocolate, you know, on that. So these are fill in the blank kind of sentences. He says, after whatever your current habit is, I will, and you do the habit I need, or after the habit I need, I will do the habit I want. So after I get my morning coffee, every morning I will say one thing I'm grateful for. See how you start tying it to a current habit and it reinforces it, and our brains just light up on that. So that was one of his hints in his book. and make it easy, decrease the number of steps between you and the good habit, prime the environment, which is sort of what we talked about, know if you want music or not want music, or if you want a ritual or not. Make small best choices. Sometimes it's overwhelming how we're going to do these new habits. So he encourages you to scale down your habits until they're done in 2 minutes. Oh, yeah, I keep thinking sometimes big habits. And you scale them down. And automate them with technology if you can. And Bethany gave us an example with that with her boys. They're a little bit easier. And I'm going to kind of run through these and make it satisfying. And I thought this was interesting. This is the 4th habit. That those first 3 laws of behavior change increases the odds that the behavior will be formed now, at this time. This 4th law about making it satisfying, that's that reward, increases the odd that the behavior will be repeated next time. Isn't that interesting?
Mm-hmm.
In that way, so it keeps that loop going. And often we need the immediate rewards. We don't need the reward that's 6 months from now. Seeing our names on the bestseller list could be a great reward. We need the reward of sometimes getting the manuscript turned in, right, Bethany? Yeah. And that's more the immediate words. So now what can we as writers do to develop good habits and reduce bad habits? I'm going to stop the screen share and come on back. I thought at least ask you guys first. You 3, you 4, 5, how many of them? 4, you 4 extra here. But did this make you think about a good habit that you want to develop or a bad habit you want to get out of? And then maybe we'll do a little sharing and we'll invite everybody to come on back in on it.
Yeah. It reminded me of a writer's chat. I believe it was on Writer's Chat several months ago, where the speaker, and I can't tell you who it was, maybe somebody else will remember, but they talked about linking something that we procrastinate about, or a habit that we want to get into that habit of doing, linking that with something that we won't miss. Like, I'm not a coffee drinker, but some of you get up and first thing you do in the morning is grab a cup of coffee. So link something with that so that you do the 2. Now, do you guys remember that? Was it on Writer's Chat that I heard that?
I think it was. It might have been something. I think so too. And Tina shared with us a bunch of stuff on some self-care and stuff. And that might be where that came from.
It stuck with me.
It was the guy.
Dirk
I
Schwartz.
think it was a guy, yeah.
Yeah, Dirk Schwartz came on. He's from South Africa and talked about developing good habits and routine.
Okay, that's good. So, but linking is an important thing to an already established habit.
Right.
On that. And that's what I think the writing routines, writing rituals can get us up and going and ready to focus if we have certain things in line. And I rarely sit down at my desk without a cup of coffee here. That's a perfect example, Norma. Jan, Bethany, Melissa, any habit you want to work on? Or
I think I just have a lot of bad habits.
like
I don't write every day, and I don't write at a specific time, and I don't write to word counts, and I don't write to a time limit. So there's no structure on what the goal is for the day. It's usually to accomplish a section or get started on something. So I don't know.
Is that a bad habit, or is that what's working for you in your present time?
The thing is, I don't know if it's working for me because I'm making it work or because that's the best way to work. I don't know.
I think James Clear would tell you do a habit tracker at that point, to track of it, because that may show you other opportunities, but it might also show you what's interfering too. So probably 3 little boys. A lot of that.
Yeah.
One thing that's helpful is my homepage is set to my Google Calendar. So my husband commented on it last week. He's like, this is the worst homepage I've ever seen because it just pops up. But the thing is, there's no distraction when I look at that. It's because it's just all the dates and things. And so I don't get sucked into a blog or reading anything.
Right.
I have to choose to go to Facebook or Instagram or whatever I'm going to do. But usually that is a habit I have, actually, and I think it's a good one. You know how like you're always writing in your head before you sit down to actually write? So getting into the zone for me is I go to Facebook, I do some of the social media stuff as I'm gearing up, and then I open the Word document, and then as soon as I'm like in the zone to go there. So that's actually how I start my writing process. It's usually never just writing. It's always starting online.
On that, some writers will finish a chapter and start the next chapter and then stop at the first paragraph. So when they open it up the next day, they're already into what they need to write. And I forget which famous writer talks about that, but I always thought that was a good habit, is what I don't have. So that way.
That's a good idea.
Novelists talk about that as they have to get back into like the scene and their character, and then they go back in.
Yeah, I'm glancing at the chat, but I know I've missed a lot here in this chat, so I'll have to go back and read it myself. But I noticed, I think it was Rhonda made the comment that she doesn't check email right away, and I am on this thing first thing in the morning sometimes checking email, and it's just that is a bad habit I've got.
Ooh.
What?
Brendan Burchard, here he is.
Oh.
Yay!
We haven't heard him in a while.
So when he did one of his trainings, that was like 4 hours for the 3 days. One of the things that he talked about was email, and I adopted this, and it has changed my life for email. So he said when he sits down, he's looking for he has a list, like in his notebook, who he's waiting on, who's waiting to hear from him, and what fires there are. And so in that preliminary email check, that's the only thing he's looking for. Fires, someone he's waiting on, and if he has to send something out right away, he does that. He just goes through and looks, and then it's done. And so I've started doing that as my precursor email, is looking for those things. And then I don't go back to it until later. And I feel like the reward then is I feel like, okay, nothing's going on that I don't know about. And now I can move on and start with my day. So if that's helpful to anybody, it changed my life for the last 2 years.
That's helpful. Say the 3 things again. Fires.
Well, okay, I'm paraphrasing in case anyone heard the training and I'm wrong, but it was things, any fires, like any emergencies that are happening, someone that he's waiting on, and he has a list of who he's waiting on every day. He updates it in his journal. And then if he has to send something out that day to somebody, he does that first thing, and then he's out. So it's like a few minutes that he's just going through the inbox to check for those 3 situations.
And then does he have a set time? Then he stays off of email? Because like Dory made a comment that she forgets to go back. But, often I know some people will say then they don't go to email to 4 o'clock in the afternoon when their mind's not or 7 at night, they pull it back up or something.
He's so disciplined. Like he goes back.
Yeah.
But he has like that. Then he knows he can sit down and he can just handle like responding and things. And he also said that he doesn't respond to other people's emergencies anymore either. So he actually, this is the second thing that changed my life. When someone asks for something that they need as an emergency on their part, but not his part, he will specifically ask them, when do you actually need this by? Like, when is I have to have this by deadline? And I've started doing that too. And a lot of times the initial email will sound like it has to be done right now because they want you to do it. But really that's kind of interfering on your time that you've scheduled. And when you ask the question, typically they'll come back and say, well, I actually don't even need it until this day. That has been a life. If you're a people pleaser, raise your hand. I'm with you. That one question has helped me be able to manage my day.
All right. That's a great tip. Elaine wanted to know if you would share your Monday routine again. Something about no calls, no appointments. Bethany,
Yeah.
Say something about that?
It's Shauna Nyquist, I think, who the author who I read this in, but she talks about things that you don't do. And so Monday, and one of the things that she talked about was no call days. And so Mondays for me, I don't take appointments unless it's like I have a ghostwriting client. He needed a call yesterday, so I made an exception. Like, I took his call. But other than that, I don't. It's blocked off from our admin. No one can make appointments that day. because Sunday is such like a family day and church day. I don't get a ton of stuff done. So Monday is really like my number one, like get into the weekday, and I don't want anyone else encroaching on that. So I might have like a team meeting with Serious Writer, but that's different. I'm still getting into the week. So yeah, Tuesday through Friday are the only days that I'm really available to people, and just setting that boundary was also helpful.
Good. So
and not natural to say.
Yeah, those are great tips. Because the email thing is I'm more of a disciplined person. I should be able to sit there and say, don't check it again. But I like that approach that you check it first for these things, and then you do it later on that. It's almost getting time. Why don't we invite everybody back in if they want to come on back in, and then they could maybe share something that maybe this conversation today has made them think or do or get excited about a good habit or a bad habit. And if you can't get on, I don't know if we've taken anybody off. If you can't come back on and you're in Writer's Chat jail, just put it in the we have to release you sometimes. And while we're still two things I want to finish up, and then we'll see what people want to add, is that next week, our own Jan, wave Jan, yay, is going to be our lead, and we're going to be creative. Today was kind of heady and talky and thinky. Next week, we're going to be creative and talk about making memes and using Canva. Correct, Jan?
Yes.
Yeah, yay!
So we'll play with Canva next week.
We'll get to play next week, guys. Play. So that'll be fun on that way. And the other thing I wanted to add, and just my final thing on the Atomic Habits, is I found this a very readable book. Yes, chapter summaries at the end if you're not really into reading a lot of stuff, on that. If you went to his website, you don't even have to buy the book. You could get a lot on his website, or borrow the book from the library. I borrowed it from the library and came around and bought it because I just thought this is going to be what I'm going to keep for a while. I just think it was just inspirational and practical, down to earth, and it's one of those, that point and click thing. It's just amazing to watch his video on that way. So I don't know if anybody wants to hop in and comment about if you changed a habit, or if there's a habit you want to work on to have us help brainstorm, or is there a bad habit you want to get rid of? I don't know. Confession time, you guys. What do you got?
I'm like Bethany. Go ahead, Sophia.
Oh, okay. I had a couple thoughts. I used to be a special ed teacher, and we studied behavioral modification a lot because it was back in the 80s, and I went to the school that Skinner did a lot of his experiments at. And one important practice I learned was never reinforce a behavior that you don't want repeated. And conversely, make sure you do reinforce the behavior that you want repeated. It's like so often kids get the attention when they're doing something wrong, and we just ignore it as long as things are peaceful. And I tried to catch my kids, or when they were younger, I tried to catch them being good. I tried to catch them doing stuff that I wanted them to do over again, and really feed into those behaviors. And that's the same thing here. Don't reinforce the habits that you feel are non-productive. One other thought I had was my husband used to say early on that a phone call, and I would say a text or a message, is a request, not a demand. And it doesn't mean that just because someone makes the request of your attention and time that they are due it immediately. And so I learned to not pick up the phone all the time, not answer a text right away, just learning to treat it as a request and weigh it against my other responsibilities. And that was really helpful for me because I tend to want to be about people all the time. And the third attitude in this kind of school is that I think as wives and mothers, we don't value our time. And we both don't value our time. We consider ourselves irreplaceable. And it's like a combination of a poor self-image and pride. And I think we would do well to learn to delegate and not demand that people do things the way we want them. And also realize that God has given us a talent, God has given us a calling, and that has value because it's not about what we want to do, it's about what the King wants us to do. And so when we fritter away our time, it's like you wouldn't be texting or playing a video game while your boss was looking over your shoulder. Well, it's that same attitude. Am I honoring the time that God has given me? And I mean, like Elaine, I mean, my time, I know, is not going to last forever. And I mean, I've had a heart attack. I've had my parents die early. And I really feel that I need to be a very good steward of the life that God has given me. So those are my thoughts while we were going through.
Great points. Very good points. Norma, you had something you wanted to share.
Well, I was going to say what Bethany was talking about earlier about making herself get up early, and she actually is more productive in the morning. Mm-hmm. I have found that out for myself, but I've been such a night owl for so long. It's tough to do that, but the days that I have to get up early and I get going, I get so much more accomplished. And so it's just trying to go from a night owl to an early bird. It's a tough trip.
Huh. Rhonda, you had made some comment in the chat. I think you got me going on emails. So you want to talk a little bit about, do you have trouble handling emails, or you don't open them, or how do you do? What have you learned about handling emails?
Well, I do have a problem with email. I run a small business, along with, for me, it's balancing the requests of people. I need this, or, hey, how are you? How is this project coming along? And it's kind of, for me in the morning, it's just a balancing act. Which of these many important things do I do today? And then the added weight, what tips the scale is when someone's waiting for something that I'm supposed to do. And I'm growing more comfortable with letting them wait. But it's a real struggle. It's a real struggle because of that whole people-pleasing thing and trying to be conscientious and right, as well as, and do working for myself and God versus working for other people. And, the whole balance of things. And most of the people I work with are in ministry. And so it gets hard to balance it all. And I know that my productivity as a writer is not as good. So I'll tell you what I've decided to do. And for me, this may work for other people. Rather than specific times, I use block times.
Yeah.
So I say, okay, mornings are for writing, period. They're for me writing. This is why I don't look at my email. Because as soon as I do, there'll be an email from so-and-so, hey, when is this coming to me? And then the guilt kicks in, and then I put that before what I intended to do. So for me, writing in the morning, and then the afternoons is for everybody else. And then the evenings is for social media. And this is just, it doesn't always work, because sometimes, we all understand the tyranny of the urgent. Something comes along and, kabong, there goes your whole day. Yeah. But as a general rule, I try to giant block some things, because, I have a planner and I plan to use it one of these days. For me, if I get too detailed in the planning, I just feel really overwhelmed.
Thank you for that, because I gave a couple people some ideas, but I think it's I don't know, I think you have to continually be mindful, pay attention, and remember the ice cube image, and all these little steps that we're doing will add up. And we may be at 30 degrees, that ice cube is not melting yet. It may just take a little bit more before that habit becomes a good habit of that. It is noon, so I want to get us kind of to wrap up the recording here and invite you guys to stay on afterwards for the after party. We'll get started that. And the tyranny of the urgent, somebody put in, and that is exactly right. Yes, put that in the chat, exactly right. on that way. And I thank you guys for being with us today, whether you're watching the replay or whether you were here with us. We had like 17, 18 in the chat there for a while. That was great. And we're so glad to see everybody. It's such a, I don't know, I always leave encouraged when we get together each week. So thank you. Thank you for being there today. Next week, we're going to have fun. We're going to play, be creative, play with our right brain instead of our left brain. And Jan, we look forward to hearing your presentation next week. So thank you, everybody. And we'll see you next week. Bye now.
Bye.